Hello and welcome to this week's episode of CSR Digest. CSR Digest is a feedback mechanism of Total Exploration and Production Nigeria Limited to x-ray some of its corporate social responsibility programs and projects to host neighboring and impacted community. This week we are looking at the Palliative initiative by Total E&P to cushion the effect of the lockdown occasioned by the coronavirus pandemic in the whole world. Sit back and watch. Represented by the Deputy General Manager, Public Affairs and Communications, Port Harcourt District, Onyekachi Omenuko, Mr. Dulaw said the gesture was necessitated by the cordial relationship between Total E&P and its host communities. According to him, the provision of medical and personal protective equipment made previously to Egi people through Erema General Hospital is in fulfillment of its corporate social responsibility and to identify with the communities during this period of COVID-19 pandemic. The Deputy Managing Director, while handing over the items to Ezagi, called for judicious and equitable distribution.
And we know that with COVID-19, things are difficult for everybody. And we know that the people impacted are the people in the communities. So we had always had it in mind that there will be a need to support them. And then the SAG also added credence to that by asking us to help. So that's why we brought it.
Manager, Community Affairs, Offshore and Port Harcourt, Okechukwu Obara, commended Egi people for conducting themselves well and obeying the rules guiding the spread of the COVID-19. He said the gesture is a way of showing concern to the plight of his host communities occasioned by the lockdown and sued for support to enable the company succeed.
It is a gesture to say we understand that things are difficult. We cannot meet every person's need, but whatever we have, let us show good faith in these difficult times.
In separate responses, Ezagi III, Ezeobuku of Oberland, King Anele Uzondo Wokoma, and President General, Egi People's Assembly, Apostle Magnus Elemele, extolled the contributions of Total E&P Nigeria Limited to the development of Egi Kingdom. They pledged to distribute the items equitably and support the company in its developmental strides.
Total, you will prosper more than you have prospered.
Amen.
I have received these food item palliatives with thanks to you and glory to God.
Amen.
We thank you.
We are so happy and we will continue to be happy because if you are having a dealing with your brother and anytime you ask him for one thing, he gives you that immediately. All you also need to do is to give him support at every point in time.
Items distributed are noodles, rice and yams. It will be recalled that Total E&P Nigeria Limited donated 2 ventilators and other medical equipment to Rivers State Government, the Nigerian Army and the Egi General Hospital as part of its effort to contain the spread of coronavirus pandemic in Rivers State. Welcome to the discussion segment of CSR Digest. CSR Digest, like I said, is a feedback mechanism by Total Exploration and Production Nigeria Limited. Today we are looking at the palliatives that have been sent to OMF 58, talking about Egi community, Ama and Idu recently as part of efforts by Total Exploration and Production Nigeria Limited to cushion the effect of the lockdown occasioned by the COVID-19 pandemic in the world. I have with me a guest and a social commentator, a father and a community leader, an entrepreneur by excellence. He is to look at these issues with me. And as a farmer, he knows the palliatives, what and how it has gone down to the beneficiaries. You're welcome to CSR Digest on RSTV.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, recently, Total Exploration and Production Nigeria Limited, one of the oil majors in OMF 58, talking about Egi, Ikwere, Emohua, Olu, and the rest of them.
Some part of them.
Yes. So, they have come with an initiative to give palliatives to those that were affected. In fact, everybody that were affected by the lockdown occasioned by the COVID-19 pandemic. In the first place, they made an attempt to bring those things as part of their CSR to their host communities. How do you look at this initiative by Total EMP?
Yeah, I must first of all commend you for this program, and I must tell you that it was a commendable effort, sincerely speaking, because when you invited me for this program, immediately I take a swipe on corporate social responsibility in the French, in the Anglo, French
As Francophone
speaking countries. Yeah. So I try to understand the digest they have about corporate social responsibility and their perspective about it. I realized that the corporate social in France was intending towards labor and labor right. But Total, as a company, and I think that is the only company for now in France that have gone beyond the labor aspect of corporate social responsibility to environmental and community aspect, which of course has presented them as a more responsible corporate citizen in their dealings. So on this, I could say that I wasn't surprised that they did, because it is already embedded in their business model. So once it is embedded in your business model, you don't struggle to do it. It just takes the responsive actions that is required, and then it goes on, because there's an accountability mechanism already set in.
In as much as the COVID-19 lasts, that people will not be allowed to maybe do one or two businesses and all that. And of course, you know that the company and all other companies were shut down because of this, to curb the spread of the virus. So, Apostle Elemele now said, it is important for the company to continue to do these palliatives from time to time. How do you look at his request?
Well, the request is in order, because that is what is expected of every responsible leader. You have to show responsibility when it is required. The statement by, again, People's Assembly President General Apostle Magnus Elemele is very well in order, and that is what is expected from the stakeholders and of course the people. So we are hoping that Total buy into that and ensure that it is properly implemented. So we will get to that in the course of our discussion.
What the company presented to the host communities was actually huge. When you look at the volume of what they brought there, and they were all kept stocked in the Obite Civic Center.
Yeah.
And that Civic Center, as big as it is, was full. Was filled with these palliatives. Now, considering the number of towns and villages within Agi, and then including Ama and Idu communities, do you think the palliatives in the first instance would have, satisfied?
Okay, now we will now look at it now from an implementation point of view. Yeah. I'm a financial professional, so I'm a number person.
Okay.
So let's go this way. Agi as a clan is 17 communities.
Yes.
The 17 is Dubuke. Now, including the two other communities from the Ibu clan, which means we are talking about 17 plus 2,
that's 19.
Which is 19. Now, let's take Irema, for instance, as a case study. After the box sharing, Irema got about 52 bags of rice, because I was following up the statistics.
Okay.
52 bags of rice and some cartons of Indomie and yam. Now in Irema we'll have about 17 or so number of families, and each of them, like the Umojun family for instance, has over 70 households. And when it was shared, what got to the Umojun family was a half bag of rice. In as much as I may not need it, but it didn't get to me. There are people who need it who are behind me, so you couldn't even get to them. So you see, it might look bulk in a hall, but the bulk should be a function of the size of the community, the size of the family formations, and the people. So imagine, filling up the whole of this warehouse, and and then you got half cup of rice from it. You see, at the end of the day, it doesn't make any social and economic sense. So it now made mockery of this noble program. So what I'm saying in essence is, Total EMP have sound professional, and I know that they have capable hands to make this analysis. They know again even more than those of us that are from again. They know our number, so it was just a mere plus minus, and they will be able to say, because Indomie could not even get to some family. Now the irony of it is this, that's why I also look at the area of implementation. Palliative should not even be for people who are very prominent. But you see, in the course of this sharing, you could see that maybe one of the Royal Highness will have a bag of rice. Of course, the one I know very sure that didn't have is Ezegi. He said, no, don't bring it to my house. It's not for me. Because I monitored it to ensure whether he would collect, but he never collected. He didn't. Now there are some, they call themselves stakeholders, who I consider barrier to development. Because when you stand against what is beneficial to your people, you will no longer blame Total. But where Total now need to look at is not just dropping the palliative, it's looking at the distribution and implementation process of this palliative. Once that is not done, so people could take a full bag of rice when the whole family of 50-something or 70-something sharing half bag. I know in Irema, 3 that took a bag of rice each and some yam. Mind you, it was 5 pieces of yam that got to my family. 5 out of 70-something.
5 tubers?
5 tubers. How do you share it? You make, even if you cook it, you cannot even get to everyone. You cannot get a plate, a portion of it. So the implementation process needs to be reviewed. And I also want to think that palliative must not necessarily mean, bringing a bag of rice, and Indomie is alien to an Ege man. What is Indomie for an Ege man who believes in gari and soup, who believes in cocoyam, who believes in yam, and he give me an elderly man a pack of Indomie as a share? He will just tell you that we don't have leaders. So leaders now bears the punch. Because why we want to blame Total, we first of all blame the leaders, because the information they pass to Total is what Total will use as the basis for their planning and of course the execution of that program.
And you don't also expect Total to come to begin to implement, to share these palliatives?
No, it is in fact, it is not workable. Total will not come to share. But Total can develop a model, because you can only account for what you can measure. Once you cannot measure it, you cannot account for it. That means your responsibility is at half. So what Total need to do is to develop an implementation model and only ensure through a feedback mechanism that they return the distribution sheet back to Total, which must be vetted. That sheet must be vetted by the Royal Highness of the community and all the family chiefs.
And certified.
Okay by the Amala, which is the highest authority in every community in Egela. And that is what Total will now use to vet, so that they are able to check the variances of the plan in relation to implementation. With this, they have established an effective feedback mechanism that can ensure that this noble program of a responsible corporate citizen like Total, which of course that is what they have exhibited, are well implemented.
Now, at this point, aside foodstuffs and maybe 1 or 2 things as palliatives, what other items do you think Total would have done better in course of their, corporate social responsibility to cushion the effect of the coronavirus lockdown?
Fine. In fact, like While I dive into that, I must first acknowledge the manager in charge of enterprise. He had done one program that have impacted life in Ege more than any other program ever, and that is the fish farm program. That fish farm program he introduced, nobody that got that fish of 500 or 1,000
Fingerling.
Those fingerling,
Yeah.
that does not have a pond today, with hope that at the maturity period the family will have a better life. And I know one of them who had already harvested and restocked. So what they did, they have injected entrepreneurial spirit on the people, and this thing got to the people that actually needed it. So what I think Total would do,
Or would have done.
per se, in addition to what they have already done, is for them to come up with non-food palliative. The non-food palliatives include more release of fingerling for more families to engage in fish farming. That's one. Two, Total need to release yam seedling for people to farm more, whether within their compound or their farm area. Three, Total need to release SME credits or grant or loan or partial loan to stimulate economic activities within Ege land during this period of crisis that we are. Because if all of this are not properly implemented, by March next year, you will know the meaning of hunger in Ege land. Because we are just coming out of crisis of armed struggle. Then COVID-19 setting. While we are struggling to stabilize economically, we are bashed by COVID-19. So again, people need Total EMP hands. I mean, full hands to lift the economic life of again.
Just before the palliatives were sent to OMF 58, there was this arrangement by Total EMP to send some hospital equipment to Rema General Hospital.
Okay.
That is, that's the nearest hospital in the Ege catchment area.
Yeah.
Now, how do you look at this gesture? Because coronavirus is also is a global health issue, and it has to do with hospitals and medical and all that. So they thought it wise to send some hospital equipment to our hospital, which is there at Rema. How do you look at this gesture?
You see, the gesture is a noble one, because by all standard, Total has shown responsibility in the course of the development of Ege clan. Let me tell you something. Ege people does not understand what is government. Everything that impacts the life of an Ege man comes from Total. You want to look at electricity, road, which road can you point in Ege that is built by government? You cannot find one, and obviously you can't. In the hospital that is built by Total, which is a Rema, listen, of course it was vandalized, almost cannibalized during the course of this armed struggle. But as responsible corporate citizens, they were able to come back to re-energize and re-engineer and of course inject new equipment into the workforce of that hospital. That is an excellent, gesture that Total have offered to Ege people.
Now, at this point, what is your advice to Ege people for which all this, gesture from Total is given?
For the Ege man, my advice for him is a man cannot cook food for you and also help you to swallow it.
Okay.
Total EMP have cooked food for again, not only in palliative, not only in road construction, not only in scholarship. If a gay man says total scholarship, he's undoing himself. Like I told you in one of our childhood, I said I was a victim. When I was doing my postgraduate, I was asked to buy scholarship. I said I'm not buying. That is an again man, not total. Total did their part. But what again is facing is what I consider a leadership failure. And the leaders should also realize that if we remind them about their failure, it is not because we intend to insult them. No, it is because we want them to realize the need to first re-examine themselves. Because, for instance, if an external auditor comes here, before they carry out an audit, they first of all do an internal review of themselves to be able to come up whether they are actually independent enough to carry out the financial audit. Again, people need to do an internal leadership behavioral review to be able to come up with a better leadership, a resilient leadership style, a contingent one that is capable of addressing all the issues that again have experienced, which now made total looks as if they're not living up to their responsibility. But it was actually because of leadership failure. And I use 4 words for it: extreme greed, selfishness. My grandmother's senior mother syndrome. So I have to be related to you. If all of these are addressed, and people who are free to speak, who are not dependent on one of the XYZ stakeholders, are the kind of leadership we need. Those kind of leadership we had in 1993, 1994, when again was able to place their foot on ground and make strategic economic demands that have changed the economic face of again up to date. That is what the again man needs. The again man leadership and of course organizational structure need to review their feedback mechanism to be more agile, so that, because once there is a bottleneck within the feedback channel, there is bound to be some inhibitions that are capable of truncating every developmental effort in that clan. So the leadership need to look at themselves and ask themselves a simple question: are we doing what posterity can remind us and of course present us in a better light tomorrow?
Right, thank you. With that, we conclude this week's episode of CSR Digest. CSR Digest will come your way again next week, God willing. But until then, I have to thank my guest, Robinson Elechi. Robinson Elechi, thank you so much for throwing more light on this issue of palliatives and other social responsibilities of Total E&P. Thank you so much, because we know we'll call you back for more important issues. Until next week, my name remains Ndon Ajie. Thank you for watching.